Welcome to the Word for 2021, a daily devotional where we go through God's Word chapter by chapter. In this devotional, we begin the Old Testament book of 2 Samuel. We're in chapter 1. In this chapter, a man comes to David looking as though he had been in battle. His clothes were torn and dust covered his head. David wanted more details. The man said that he had come from the battle where Saul and Jonathan both had died. Then he tells David this story. He said that he was on Mount Gilboa where Saul was. Saul was injured, and Saul asked him to kill him before the enemy came to run him through. So the man said that he stood over Saul and he killed him. And now he was bringing David the king's crown and his armband. It's an amazing story, but it was a lie. Because in 1 Samuel chapter 31 and 1 Chronicles chapter 10, it says that Saul killed himself by falling on his own sword. His armor bearer, who was afraid to kill him, fell on his sword too. So this account that this man was giving was a lie. David inquired more about this man and found out that he was an Amalekite. He was simply wanting to gain favor with David by saying that he had killed David's enemy. Let me tell you more about the Amalekites. When we read in 1 Samuel chapter 15, Saul was given a mission. In verse 2 of that chapter we read that this is what the Lord said, "I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them." God wanted total annihilation. He wanted Saul to totally destroy everything about the Amalekites, for this was lethal judgment upon the Amalekites by God. But Saul disobeyed. He took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and not all of the Amalekites were killed. Many survived. Because of one man's disobedience, the Amalekites continued on. Later we read that a raiding party of the Amalekites went to Ziklag while David and his 600 men were away and attacked that compound. They totally destroyed it. They burned it to the ground, but they took all of the women and the children and all of the flocks with them. David then pursued. He attacked the Amalekites and he defeated them, but 400 of them still escaped. The next time we read about the Amalekites, it's in the book of Esther. Esther became the queen, but there was a man that the king had honored, and his name was Haman. It says that Haman was an Agagite. That means that he was a distant relative of Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And Esther had a relative by the name of Mordecai. As we read this book, it says that Mordecai would not give honor to Haman. And so it says that Haman burned with anger. In chapter 3, verse 5 of the book of Esther, it says that when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down to him and pay honor to him, he was enraged. Yet learning that Mordecai's people were the Jews, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all the Jews. This was because God had told the Jews to totally destroy the Amalekites, and now it was Haman's chance to turn the tables. One man's disobedience had a ripple effect, and for generations to come, this was played out. What do we learn from this chapter? One thing is that we do not sin in a vacuum. Sin always affects others. Sin can bring about a generational curse or generational bondage. In the same way, obedience too can affect generations to come. In the second commandment of the 10 Commandments, this is what we read. "You shall not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth below, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to thousands of generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." In 1727, Jonathan Edwards married Sarah. Now, Jonathan Edwards was a respected preacher. He was the one that God used to bring about the first Great Awakening. Jonathan and Sarah had 11 children. And every night, Jonathan would sit in a chair for an hour with his children. They would have small talk, conversation, but during that time, he would pray blessings over his children every single night. In 1900, A.E. Winsop tracked down 400 descendants of the Edwards, and this is what he found. Of the Edwards descendants, 285 became college graduates, 300 became preachers, 13 were noted authors, 13 were college presidents, 65 were professors, there were 100 lawyers and 30 judges, 1 dean of a law school. There were 56 doctors, 1 dean of a medical school, 3 senators, 1 vice president of the United States, and 80 others who held public office. The spiritual seeds of obedience planted by the Edwards into their children, it blossomed into a family tree that produced numerous generations of spiritual fruit. What we do really does affect others. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.